Maya had always been drawn to the quiet edges of town, where the streets seemed narrower, the houses older, and the air carried a faint, lingering sense of something forgotten. When she found a listing for a cheap apartment online, she almost couldn't believe her luck. The building looked aged but sturdy, tucked behind a row of unassuming shops and lined with elm trees that had been there for decades. The price was suspiciously low, but she convinced herself it was simply a good deal for someone willing to overlook minor imperfections. The neighborhood felt unusually still as she parked her car. The street was nearly empty, with only a few scattered cars and a couple of distant pedestrians. The building itself was a 2-story brick structure, paint peeling in places, windows slightly warped from years of exposure to the sun. The front door had no number, only a faint scratch etched into the metal, vaguely resembling the number 7. The doorbell had no label, only a worn brass button that looked as if it had been pressed thousands of times over the decades. Maya unlocked the door with the key Mr. Carter, the landlord, had handed her. He had seemed distracted, almost anxious, when he handed it over. His words lingered in her mind. "Just don't open the door if anyone knocks after midnight." She had laughed at the time, assuming it was just a peculiar joke. The interior of the apartment was surprisingly cozy. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, and a small balcony overlooking the back alley gave a charm that the exterior did not hint at. Yet something about the place felt off. The air smelled faintly of dust and old varnish, but there was a faint undertone she couldn't place. A metallic tang, almost imperceptible at first, as if the apartment carried a memory of something long past. Maya spent the first day unpacking, arranging the sparse furniture she had brought, and tried to convince herself that the eerie stillness of the building was nothing more than her imagination. The sun cast long shadows through the windows, and the quiet was so complete it pressed against her ears, a heavy weight that made every creak of the floorboards feel amplified. As the evening approached, the shadows lengthened, the room grew colder, and Maya felt a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. She dismissed it as fatigue, attributing the chill to an old building with drafty windows. By the time she climbed into bed, she felt tired but comforted by the apparent normalcy of her new home. The first knock came precisely at 2:33 a.m. 3 slow, deliberate raps against the door echoed through the apartment. Maya's heart jumped. She froze, listening, waiting for anything to appear beyond the door. When she finally worked up the courage to look through the peephole, there was nothing, just the dark hallway beyond. The knocking stopped abruptly, leaving behind an oppressive silence that seemed to press into the corners of the room. Maya lay awake for the rest of the night, her mind racing with rational explanations, wind, settling wood, perhaps even the faint sound of a neighbor returning late. But as the hours passed, a gnawing unease settled in her chest. Something about the building felt aware. The following days passed uneventfully at first. Maya explored the town, ran errands, and tried to adjust to her new routine. Yet each night, as darkness fell, the apartment seemed to change in subtle ways. Shadows shifted in corners where there should have been none. The faint metallic tang in the air returned, stronger, almost tasting of rust and cold stone. She began noticing small, inexplicable details. Bookshelves tilted ever so slightly overnight, their contents rearranged without explanation. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet in a rhythm that was not consistent with the building's settling. On 2 occasions, she swore she saw reflections in the windows that did not match her own movements, a figure standing silently behind her, vanishing when she spun around. One evening, curiosity compelled her to check the apartment directory posted near the front entrance. The building was supposed to have 6 units, yet the directory only listed 5. Her apartment, the one she now occupied, was absent. It was as if it had never existed. A chill ran down her spine, but she dismissed it, telling herself old buildings often had discrepancies. The knocking at 2:33 a.m. continued, now almost nightly. The sound had become sharper, more deliberate, echoing in the hallway as if the building itself were alive and watching. The first time Maya did not respond, she found herself gripping the edge of her bed, unable to move as the knocks persisted. It was not just sound anymore. They resonated within her chest, vibrating with an intensity that made her teeth ache. By the fourth night, sleep became nearly impossible. The darkness of the apartment seemed thicker, heavier, pressing against her skin. She noticed the air temperature fluctuating inexplicably. One moment the room would be freezing cold, the next stiflingly warm. The walls appeared to subtly shift in size, the ceiling slightly higher or lower, as though the apartment itself were rearranging its interior around her. During the day, neighbors walked past the building without ever glancing at her. Conversations outside were muffled and distorted, almost dreamlike. She tried to ask someone about the missing apartment in the directory, but those she approached seemed not to see the building clearly, or they shook their heads as though dismissing her concerns entirely. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, Maya noticed that her shadow did not align with her body. It lingered slightly behind, its movements a heartbeat slower, its edges unnaturally sharp. When she turned quickly, it remained for a fraction longer before catching up. The thought struck her with terrifying clarity. She might be the only one truly seeing this place for what it was. The unease grew unbearable, gnawing at her with each passing day. Yet, some inexplicable force rooted her to the apartment, keeping her from leaving. Each exit she attempted seemed subtly, invisibly obstructed. Her car keys disappeared and reappeared in impossible locations. Doors she tried to open led her back into the apartment, as if space itself had been folded around her. By the end of the second week, Maya's exhaustion was visible in the dark circles under her eyes. The apartment, once seemingly harmless, had become a living entity, its presence oppressive and suffocating. Even the sunlight that filtered through windows during the day seemed muted, as though the building resisted illumination. Shadows clung stubbornly to corners, stretching unnaturally and refusing to retreat. One morning, while checking her mailbox, Maya noticed an elderly woman walking slowly along the sidewalk. She wore a long, faded coat and carried a wicker basket, her gaze fixed firmly ahead. There was something peculiar in the way she moved, deliberate and careful, as if avoiding invisible obstacles. On impulse, Maya approached her. The woman paused and looked directly at her, her eyes sharp despite her age. Without introduction, she spoke in a low, tremulous voice. Maya had expected to ask questions first, but the words seemed to leap out of her. You shouldn't be here. That apartment, it isn't real. And yet, now that you're inside, it won't let you leave. The warning sent a shiver down Maya's spine. She tried to ask more, but the woman only shook her head, murmuring about trapped souls and the way the walls remember. Then, as if unwilling to stay longer, she turned and walked away, leaving Maya with a sense of dread that clung to her like a second skin. Returning to the apartment, Maya noticed that the atmosphere had shifted again. The faint metallic tang in the air had become sharper, almost metallic like blood or iron. The shadows moved more aggressively now, sometimes stretching toward her when she was stationary, retreating only when she moved. The knocking at 2:33 a.m. had become louder, insistent, and rhythmic, almost demanding attention. Each night, she attempted to leave, but every exit she tried led her back into the same hallway, the same apartment, the same door with the scratch that resembled the number 7. The front door seemed farther away than it should have been, the steps leading down to the street interminable. Maya's sense of time began to warp. Hours passed in seconds, minutes stretched into long, unbroken sequences of disorienting perception. She explored the apartment obsessively during the day, searching for hidden passages, overlooked doors, anything that could explain the impossibility. She found nothing, only the same rooms, the same furniture, rearranged subtly, almost mockingly. The bookshelf had shifted again. The books were alphabetized now, although she had left them in no order. Small objects appeared where they had never been before. A single shoe on the kitchen counter, a cracked picture frame leaning against the wall, a flickering lamp that no longer belonged to her. It was then that she realized something horrifying. The apartment seemed to be learning her habits, anticipating her movements, shaping itself around her fears. Each night, the knocking became more deliberate, sometimes coming from inside the apartment itself. Sometimes it came from behind her, even though the hallway was empty. Maya understood the old woman's warning fully for the first time. The apartment was not just a location. It was a predator, and she was its newest occupant, slowly being absorbed into its impossible, shifting walls. The nights had grown unbearable. The knocking at 2:33 a.m. was no longer just a sound. It had become a presence. Each tap vibrated through Maya's very bones, reverberating in her chest as if the apartment itself were speaking. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, crawling along the ceiling, pooling in corners with a density that made them feel almost liquid. One evening, Maya awoke to an unfamiliar, almost electric hum. It filled the apartment, pressing against her ears, vibrating in her skull. The room was darker than the deepest night, yet faint shapes moved within it, elongated silhouettes that seemed both near and impossibly distant. She could feel them watching, aware of every small movement she made. Drawn by some instinct she didn't understand, Maya approached the hallway. The walls seemed to pulse, bending inward, then stretching outward as if breathing. A figure emerged from the darkness, a man in an old coat, his face blurred, impossible to focus on. He was the same shape she had glimpsed in reflections, the same presence she had sensed in the shifting shadows. As she moved closer, the air thickened, pressing against her lungs. The figure remained silent, unmoving, yet she felt every movement of its attention upon her. The apartment responded to her fear, twisting the walls, elongating the corridors, making the space feel infinite. Every step Maya took brought her back to the same door, the same scratch resembling the number 7. Panic surged, but the figure did not advance. It only observed, its blurred features flickering like a failing projection. Maya realized that the apartment and the figure were one entity, intertwined. The building had absorbed countless previous occupants, leaving their impressions behind in its walls. Their fates were etched into the floorboards, into the paint, into the shadows themselves. In that moment, she understood. Leaving the apartment was impossible. Each attempt to escape merely led her deeper into its labyrinthine interior. The walls whispered fragments of past voices, memories of those trapped before her. Their echoes joined with the persistent knocking, creating a chorus of lost souls. Desperate, Maya fled to the apartment, running past rooms that seemed to multiply, expanding endlessly. Furniture appeared where it had never been, and doors opened to walls, only to shift and form new corridors. She could feel the building stretching and folding around her, an entity aware of her terror, feeding on it, shaping reality itself to trap her further. Finally, she reached a window. The glass was thick and black, reflecting an infinite void beyond rather than the familiar street. Shadows swirled behind the glass, beckoning, consuming. And then she heard it, not a knock, not a whisper, but a voice low and resonant, coming from everywhere at once. "Now, you belong to us." Maya's reflection appeared in the window, distorted, older, hollow-eyed. Her own face stared back at her, yet it was not truly her. It was the shape the apartment wanted her to become, another imprint for the walls to remember. The following morning, the street outside the apartment was calm, almost unnaturally so. Sunlight spilled across the sidewalks. Birds chirped in the distance, and the town seemed to carry on as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet where the building was supposed to stand, there was nothing but a blank wall, the bricks seamless and unbroken. Neighbors passed without a glance, walking on as though the street had always been empty. A light breeze stirred the leaves on the elm trees, but the wind carried no sound from the vanished apartment. Maya's car was gone, and with it, every trace that she had ever been there. It was as if the apartment had never existed in the physical world at all. But those who walked by at night might catch a flicker of light in the shape of a window on the otherwise solid wall. They might see a shadow shift just behind the glass, A figure paused in a moment of suspended reality. And if one were to press an ear against the bricks, faint knocks might echo, 3 slow, deliberate raps, always at 2:33 a.m., accompanied by whispers too low to understand. Inside the apartment, Maya's reflection remained in the invisible windows, older, hollow-eyed, an echo of the life she had once known. She had become another imprint, another memory for the building to trap and distort. The entity that was the apartment had fed on her fear, shaped reality around her, and claimed her as it had claimed so many before. Time outside moved on. The town forgot her, and soon the street returned to the quiet rhythm of normal life. But the apartment, unseen by all, waited patiently for the next occupant, someone who would stumble upon its listing online, someone who would be drawn to its cheap rent and isolated location. The scratches on the door, the familiar number 7, the knocking at 2:33 a.m., they were always ready, waiting for another soul to enter and never leave. And so the cycle continued, quietly, imperceptibly, like a predator lying in wait, shaping reality itself to ensure that the apartment's story would never truly end. Its walls remembered everything. Its shadows remembered everyone. And within its endless, impossible corridors, Maya, like those before her, would remain forever, a whisper among the